Hi, this is Sue Greenwald with Awakened Stories. I'm here today with Rebecca Austill Clausen. Hey, Becky, how are you?
Cheers. It is so fun to see you again. Thank you so much for having me talk.
Good to see you again. So, we're going to talk about how Becky became awakened. And I know her from the Empowered Light Holistic Expo. She's been a speaker there for I don't even know how many expos, six maybe expos or whatever. And we've gotten together for lunch. She lived in Pennsylvania when I lived there as well. So we've gotten to know each other a little bit better. I have read her book, so I have some secret information about how she became awakened. But we're going to hear some kind of like her life story and how she became awakened, how she wrote that amazing book, and what she's doing now. So
You are so kind. Thank you so much.
so can you tell us a little bit about how you grew up and your family, whether you were religious, close, like kind of did you have traumas in your childhood, like major traumas, that kind of thing. Anything that could have led to an awakening or, did you come right out of the chute that way? That kind of stuff.
Sounds great.
Yeah.
I come from a family of six, my mom and my dad, and then we had four children, and I was the oldest. And I had a lovely childhood. An interesting thing is my dad has been a minister. He was an Episcopalian minister for years. And so I was a PK, a preacher's kid, except religion for me never necessarily worked. Spirituality has worked for me, but I just couldn't find the joy in the religion services, even though I was a church organist for 4+ years, etc. We were very, very close as a family, and I did have a major trauma that led to me writing this book. And so, do you want me to go into that?
Yeah, it sounds like had, we'll call it a normal childhood, like, pretty happy growing up and everything. Why don't we go fast forward to the trauma? Like, were you intuitive before that happened? Did you have psychic or like a knowing before the trauma happened?
Absolutely not. I had
Okay.
no psychic, no spiritual experience. And I am an occupational therapist. I'm a science-based occupational therapist. And no, I had no idea that
Yeah,
there was anything other than physical reality.
right. So you were just bebopping along with life, and then you had a tragedy happen. So do you want to talk about that, and then what happened after?
Sure. And it's so nice to be with you again. I must say, this is quite delightful.
It is exciting, isn't it?
It is. So what happened with me happened in, gosh, it was the early 1990s. And we always go camping, and we camp in Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And so we were getting together, our family was getting together for our summer camping vacation. And I was walking on the beach with my brother, David. And David was at the time about 33 years old. He had come out that he was gay in his early 20s. And it was a time in the 1990s when thousands and thousands of people were dying of AIDS. It was a very, very sad time. So I just casually said to Dave, "Hey, Dave, have you been tested for AIDS?" And Sue, he turned away. And that was not what I expected at all. It was the longest 10 seconds of my life. The sun went behind the clouds. My heart started to beat faster. I couldn't understand why David wasn't answering me that he was fine. And he turned back and said, "I'm HIV positive." And I feel sort of silly to say at the time, I had no idea what that meant, but I didn't. And I said, "David, what does that mean?" And he said, "It goes into AIDS." And that meant he was going to die. Nobody was living when they caught AIDS
Right,
in the middle 1990s.
right.
And so I immediately said, "Well, David, are you getting good medical care?" And he lived outside of Boston, and it was affiliated with Harvard. And so he was getting very good medical care. And it's a Boston accent. You'll hear the Boston accent throughout this time. So anyway, he says, "I'm getting the best medical care I can get, affiliated with Harvard, and I'm taking all the precautions." And I said, "Well, what can I do?" And he said, "Please don't tell anyone. Please don't even tell your husband. Please don't tell your family. I don't want to be treated any differently." And so, of course, I said, "Fine. I'd do anything for my brother." He was 4 years younger than I was.
Right.
what happened was it left me with no support system. And so somehow I found myself in a local bookstore, the Barnes and Noble bookstore in Exton, Pennsylvania. And I know now that I was guided, but I didn't know anything about the afterlife at that point. And I ended up in the New Age section, which I also never heard about. And I started to read books on the afterlife. And I sent some of these to my brother so that when he passed, he was somewhat aware that there may be a possibility that he could still live. But none of us, neither one of us knew anybody that believed in the afterlife, that we didn't know mediums, we didn't know psychics, we didn't even know if this was real. 6 weeks after he passed, I was filled with grief, and I couldn't understand why my brother passed, because everything in life, I believe, has a positive lining, and I couldn't find anything positive about his passage. I was riding my horse through a Christmas tree farm in Chester Springs, Pennsylvania, and I received the best present of my life that day. When our heart is so filled with grief, we can't feel anything but the grief. But it was really beautiful. That day, we had just had our first frost, and icicles were hanging from the trees, and rainbows were sparkling. And I opened my heart just a little and said, "Thank you, universe, for a beautiful day." I closed my eyes, and there was my brother. David was in human form. He was wearing a black and red plaid flannel shirt, dungarees, and sandals. And I started to talk with him because I had never done anything like this before, and realized within a second, all I had to do is share thought. He was great. I was great. I'm with my brother. The scene is luminescent, filled with love. I looked to the right. They were my grandparents, Abe and Bessie Dole, holding hands like they always did. My 6'2" grandfather, my 4'10" grandmother. Beside them was Edward, who had passed about 6 months ago. Beside Edward was a friend of mine, Holly, who had passed about, 20 years ago. And then there were about 24 other people that had passed. Actually, I believe they were the ones that I had played the organ for their funeral. The story goes on, but it was the first time that I believed that life was eternal. I looked for a teacher, found a shaman, all sorts of synchronicities about that, and learned how to continue communicating with my brother. And until this day, I still receive communications, both receiving and sharing with him and hundreds of other people.
All right. So that time when you're on the horse and it's a beautiful day and you're in gratitude, which is a high vibration, you see your brother, and it's winter, so he had sandals on. Interesting to note. Was he hovering or floating above the earth? Was he standing on the ground? Was he like just in your mind's eye? Like, how did you see him?
He was standing on a hill, and it was a grassy hill, and he was there, and there was a golden arch behind him. And so when I saw this golden arch, I had read by this point about 200 books, and I had read that if there's a door or a window or something that looks like it could take us to another realm, to go through it if we felt comfortable. So I looked to David to see if he was going to bring me through this golden colored arch, not McDonald's. And my 4'10" grandmother takes me by the hand, and we skip through this arch.
Wow.
And on the other side of the arch, Sue, was a fuchsia colored land. It was almost as bright as the beautiful red rubrum lilies you have in the back of you. It was that stunning. And I have 2 children now, Kenny and Ryan, and they're in their early 30s, and they've heard this story multiple times, as you can well imagine. And they say to me, "Mom, do not say that you had a fuchsia colored land." And I'm like, "Well, why is that?" And they say, "Because it sounds like you're tripping, sounds like you're drunk, sounds like you're loaded." And I'm like, "Well, it was. That's how it was." And in this fuchsia colored land, I didn't see, but I heard my other grandfather, my paternal grandfather. And he had passed, about 15 years ago. And he said, "Get over here." And he takes me by the hand, and we fly, absolutely fly through this fuchsia colored land for what seemed like hours. And then all of a sudden, my horse starts to move. And so I'm sitting on the horse, and I said to Gramps, with by thought, Gramps, I need to go back. So we did this U-turn in this fuchsia colored land. He brings me to the golden arch. I fly through the arch. The horse is moving. There's my brother, Grandma, Grandpa, Edward, Holly, 24 other people. And I'm on this horse. And I said, I need to go back. Everybody all at the same time said, we will always be here. We will always be here. And I pulled up the reins and thought, whoa, what just happened to me?
That must have been an amazing experience.
It was beyond anything I could have ever imagined.
Right, right. So now you believe in synchronicities and all at the afterlife and in alternate realities. Like, what does a fuchsia land look like? Did they have trees over there? Did they have like trees and things? They were all just fuchsia or shades of fuchsia? Or
for me, it was just a brilliant fuchsia color. There wasn't anything except for my grandfather and myself.
Cool.
Now, that doesn't mean that it's always like that, but that's how it was for me.
That's how you perceived it, at least. Okay. All right. So you had that experience that day, and I'm assuming that you were pretty excited, and you went back home and said, guess what happened? And everybody was like, they looked at you probably a little crazy. But then what happened after that?
Well, actually, what happened was I went back to work. I'm like, I sat there for about 20 minutes and processed this, and then went back to work. And that night I went to the library because I thought, okay, I need to figure out what happened here. And I did tell my husband, and thank goodness he was supportive. Like, he didn't tell me I was nuts. But I did go to the library, and I was walking up and down the aisles, and I guess what I expected, Sue, was that the book would fall out and land at my feet. And it did not happen. And I didn't know what to look for. I didn't know the name. I didn't know anything. And I'm like, well, that's not going to work. And so I went to the local health food store and thought, well, maybe there'll be something here. And so I'm at the local health food store looking at the bulletin board, and nothing resonated. Nothing. And so at that point I asked, and that is a recommendation that I give to people to this day, to ask, to be very clear about what you want. And what I asked for was a teacher. I would like a teacher to teach me how to communicate and continue communicating with my brother. And then I let it go. And then a couple of weeks later, a friend of mine who's an occupational therapist, and because I'm an OT, it helped validate the reality of this concept that I was not losing my mind, because I didn't know anybody that was dealing with anything like this. But a friend of mine, Dr. Amy Carroll, she was on my staff at the time, and she came in and she said, how are you doing? Because she knew that my brother had passed, and I didn't dare tell her anything about this. And she said, I met someone that I think you'd like. And I said, well, who's that? And she said, it's a shaman. Now, I had read about shamans, that they were in Brazil or Peru or whatever. And I said, you met a shaman? And she said, yes, this shaman lives in Reading, Pennsylvania, which you know Reading. And Reading is about 40 minutes from where I live, and it's an urban city. And I'm like, a shaman lives in Reading, Pennsylvania? And lo and behold, Nancy Ariel was the shaman, and she was fantastic. And I ended up apprenticing with Nancy for 3 to 6 hours a week for a year.
Yeah. So you would drive up to Reading, and you would learn the lesson, or whatever would happen. I remember you tell some of those details in your book, going up in a bad snowstorm.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you became more familiar with what we call the metaphysical information that really wasn't out in Barnes and Noble at that point, but has become more mainstream and more prevalent, thankfully.
It has, because this is the 1990s. David passed in 1995, and people were not talking about complementary modalities. They were not talking about after-death communication. I mean, it was not part of the communication. Yoga was even considered a bit far out.
Yes, especially in Pennsylvania, East Coast. Oh, those yoga people, they're vegetarians. Oh, Believe me, I know because I would go to the Barnes and Noble and I'd look at the shelf and I actually wrote a couple yoga manuals and things
Great.
and for my people basically, but I would look at the metaphysical shelves and I had read every book on there a billion times. A near death experience, past lives, all this stuff. I read them all a billion times. And now there's so much more out there. And of course, we've got YouTube and the internet, which really wasn't a big thing back then. So we're so lucky, aren't we? To
We
have
are.
information out there and videos like this that can kind of anchor into people that watch. This is real. These experiences happen to people. Not all of them talk about it, especially back then, because no one wanted to be called weird or crazy, right?
Agreed. Agreed. I thought people would think I had lost my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like I had two parts of my brain because I had a private practice that I ended up having for 32 years. And so I had one part of my brain that was the manager, private practice, profit and loss, human relations, marketing, all of that. And then I had the other side of my brain that was spiritual, communicating with my brother, traveled to the afterlife multiple times, learned all about alternative realities. It was really quite
Right.
something.
Right. And you're a person that can have a foot in both worlds, the physical world, material world, whatever you want to call it, and then the spiritual world. All right. So not everybody can do that. A lot of people that are spiritual, they're so like out there, if you will, that they have trouble like relating to the physical, but you're a person that can blend both in a beautiful fashion. So you don't have to shove it down anyone's throat, but you tell your experience and people like they trust you. They understand it the way you've written it. It's a beautiful thing,
Thanks,
So that
Sue.
just it gives it credibility that these experiences are real.
The way I've after 20 years, so I studied and studied and studied and went to dozens of workshops and read more, hundreds and hundreds of books, and became quite proficient at a lot of the energy healing modalities and communicating with the afterlife and such. But I was still scared until gosh, I reached the magic age of 60. And I said, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care what people think. This happened to me and I am going to share it. And I was trying to figure out if I had enough courage to say that I was an occupational therapist in the book that I had written about 6 times, but didn't have the courage to share. And it described the first year after my brother passed. And I ended up going to an American Occupational Therapy Association annual conference. And it was right when I was trying to decide what I was going to share in this book. And there was a poster by Dr. Anne Marie Hansen, and it was on spirituality. And I thought, my gosh. And I knew as OTs, we did something in spirituality, but I didn't really know what. I looked at this poster for about 10 minutes and my whole life changed. And I thought, all right, there is a place in OT for what happened with me. And at that point, I had become a Reiki master and I learned Reiki in 1996. So I've been doing it for a long time. And I thought, I wonder if I could teach Reiki at the American Occupational Therapy annual conference. It had never been done before. And so I submitted a proposal, and I'm pretty active within the American and state OT association. So I had an idea about how to write these because they're blind review proposals. And lo and behold, Reiki level 1 got accepted. 2015. And so 2016, I wrote another proposal for Reiki 1 and Reiki 2, and I teach them in one-day classes, and that got accepted. And so, Sue, every single year, I rewrite and update all the research and all of that and submit the proposals for Reiki 1 and Reiki 2. And I'm thrilled to say every year at the in-person AOTA annual conferences, Reiki level 1 and level 2 have been taught, including the upcoming 2023 conference. And so it's been really, really fun to bring Reiki to the occupational therapy community and physical therapy and nurses and integrative health and all of that.
It is very exciting because many of the hospitals now have Reiki for their patients or whatever. They're offering that. I know a couple people in Chester County that are volunteering there
Yes.
to do Reiki for the patients, which is really a comforting thing for someone that's in the hospital. And in my mind, Reiki is like kind of a gateway, if you will. Okay, so you have to explain how energy and frequencies work. And so let's just say you have someone off the street that really doesn't know about that. This is where they can learn, and they even feel the energy. They feel the warmness or the comfort of the energy. And they'll look at me and they'll be like, whoa, that's real. And I'm like, well, duh. But it's a way for them to tiptoe into that and to kind of anchor that in, and maybe use it as a point for their next adventure,
Sure.
into spirituality, a jumping point. So
Well,
it's cool.
The idea is that we all have energy within us. And so if we go to the hospital and we have something the matter with our heart, so something's the matter with our heart, we'll have an EKG, an electrocardiogram, which measures the beat of our heart. That's measuring the energy. It's measuring the energy of our heart. If we have an EEG, an electroencephalogram, that's measuring our brain waves. So that's energy. Or if we have an MRI, we do something to our arm and we have a magnetic resonance image.
Right.
It's looking at the health or the disease of that particular tissue. It's looking at the energy. But we don't, in the United States, we don't call it energy, but that's what it is. And Reiki brings us back to providing ourselves with our own healing, and then we can learn how to help others heal.
Yes.
It's a wonderful, wonderful modality, and you can learn it in one day.
Right. And the fact that you're providing this to scientists and scientific, and we'll call them material world workers, so that they understand energy and frequency is really exciting.
It's a blast. And it's not just for medical professionals, but because I'm a occupational therapist, that is a focus of mine, but anybody can go. And it really is a blast, because all my trainings have at least 3 sessions where people work one-on-one with each other. So at the end of the day, you learn how to heal yourself and partner with one other person where you're receiving and sharing Reiki. So you can tell the difference in people's energy with just one day. It's so fun, Sue. It's an absolute blast.
It's a really good way for someone, like I said, entry level, will say, someone to validate that this energy thing is real.
Yes.
Right? So you can do, let's say you have whatever, a stomach ache, a backache, you can do self-healing on yourself and heal yourself in, a few minutes. And it should be quite an eye-opener for most people.
Yes. One of the problems with Reiki has been the lack of scientific validity.
Right.
In 2019, a wonderful, it's called a large-scale study of Reiki, was published in the Journal for Alternative and Complementary Medicine. So it's in 2019, and anybody can get it. You just Google large-scale Reiki study. And it's there's 3 authors, Dyer, Baldwin, and Rand, D-Y-E-R. So you just Google large-scale Reiki study. And what it says is that there were 1,411 people that received 1 session of Reiki in the United States. 99 Reiki masters provided these sessions, and all these Reiki masters were trained the same way. William Rand has a group where he trained all the Reiki masters. Statistically significant results with reduction in pain, stress, and anxiety, and an increase in well-being occurred. And so within 1 session of Reiki, we have valid statistical proof that we can start to feel better and reduce pain, stress, and anxiety.
Right. And that's so important now, because in my opinion, and it's easier to have these communications with the other side, whatever you want to call them, visions, experiences, whatever, when you're relaxed. Okay.
Yes.
When you're stressed and you're busy with work and you're running around with your phone in your face, it's really hard to let the outside world in, that these messages come to you or whatever. But when you're relaxed in a meditative state, whatever, it's much easier to have that come to you. What would you agree with that?
I absolutely would. And I'm thinking it is so fun to see you again. Yes, that is absolutely
Yeah.
correct. And so on that line, so I started teaching Reiki at the American OT conference in 2015. 2017, Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, calls me up and they said, "Hey, Beck, a number of our faculty went to your trainings, and we were wondering if you could please come to Duquesne and teach all our graduating OT students Reiki level 1." And so I'm like, okay, that'd be great. And then they said, how about if we partner with the Pittsburgh community and we can bring in additional OTs or PTs or nurses or whatever, or family, friends, whatever.
Right.
And so I said, okay, that'd be great. So on Friday, I walk into Duquesne University, and I always try to, for my in-person classes, because I also teach online. For the in-person, I get there the day before and set it up in like a beautiful spa type environment. So it's relaxing.
Right.
So there's about 40, 44 students there. And I said, "Hi, I'm Becky Austill Clausen, and I'm here to teach you Reiki. How many of you are familiar with Reiki?" And Sue, not one person raised.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh my. The next day, there were 30 people, about 30 people. So in one weekend, 70 people learned Reiki. And I'm delighted to say that 20% of 70 people received after-death communication from their loved ones living beyond.
That's
15
so
people. And I'm like, whoa, because it essentially always happens with me when I'm with somebody, but it doesn't always happen. But it can happen. But to have 15 people, like, holy moly. Well, then I do a fair amount of work with hospice, and there's a number of Reiki masters and myself decided to go to Lily Dale. You know Lily Dale, I think, don't you?
Yes.
Okay, so Lily Dale is in Lily Dale, New York, and it's close to Erie, Pennsylvania, and it's the largest community of psychics and mediums in the United States. It's called the Spiritualist Assembly. It's the first spiritualist assembly in the United States. It was started, I think, 1882, something like that. Well, anyway, we go to Lily Dale, and they offer free Reiki. And it's every day in the summer at their healing temple. And I thought, if Lily Dale offers free Reiki, and I had that tremendous experience at Duquesne, where 15 people in one weekend received communication from their loved ones that were living beyond, Reiki really does enhance after-death communication. And so every class that I teach talks about that component. And it's really been fun to bring the benefits of Reiki and how it enhances our awareness of the afterlife to the Reiki classes.
That's super exciting. That's super exciting. I didn't know that you had such great success. Like the classes I've ever taught, the people would be just shocked that they could feel the energy, shocked. And they, like, a lot of them would sign up, like, I'll give it a try, kind of a thing. They were like not 100% believing in it. And then once they would even do the first day, they would be like, wow. So it's very exciting. And like I said, that just opens the door for these other experiences and other knowledge and other communication. And, hopefully, like I always thought yoga was a good stepping off spot as well, because, yoga is mind, body, spirit. It's not just physical exercise. So you do yoga and then you start, let's say, to eat a little healthier because you feel better. Then you start to maybe meditate or stay silent a little bit. And then you might, have more experiences. It's kind of a way to open up the door to more knowledge, to more experiences, which is very exciting.
It's a blast.
Yeah.
And it's whatever works. Yoga, Reiki, Tai Chi, Qigong, they're all what's called a biofield energy modality, because we have energy within us and around us. And all of those help to enhance our access of energy.
Right.
And it's wonderful.
Right. There used to be twice a year of Haverford College. They would have these meetings, and they were just fabulous. And I met Dr. Beverly Rubrick there.
Oh, nice.
She had done a study on Reiki, and so she would show the Kirlian photography with someone's aura. Like, so someone that's bebopping around in the material life, living a regular life, they might have like kind of, we'll call it holes in their aura, like places where it's not as contiguous and nice and solid as it could be. And so if someone does meditation, Reiki, Qigong, Tai Chi, they've proven scientifically that the aura becomes whole and complete again. That's a big deal. That is a big deal. Not only do you feel good, but then you're resistant to outside negativity getting into your field.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So when I teach Reiki, I have a picture, a Kirlian photography picture that takes a picture of your aura. After about 3 months of me learning from Nancy Ariel, this shaman, an occupational therapist friend of mine, Dr. Michael Peasy, was putting on a state-of-the-art holistic conference. And at that conference, an occupational therapist, Anne Marie McClintock, was teaching Reiki.
Okay.
So I go to this conference and thought, and I was skeptical. I have to say, I was skeptical. And I didn't even know there was an aura, essentially. I mean, I thought there might be, but I didn't really know. So I had a Kirlian photography photograph of my aura the first day I get there. And so you can see it was my upper half. So you can see part of it was missing. So I had a part of my whole aura that's missing. 3 days later, I had learned Reiki, had gone to this conference. It was absolutely fantastic. I learned tons of different complementary modalities. The people were normal. They weren't like totally off the wall. Physicians, nurses, therapists, psychologists, social workers, all of that. And so at the end of the conference, I said, hey, I wonder, let me have another picture done. So I have another picture of Kirlian photography. My aura is totally complete. Nice. And that was in 3 days.
Right. That's crazy. That's crazy exciting. When I went to the Bosnian pyramid, okay, so nobody even knows there's pyramids in Bosnia. Yes, it's bigger than the one in Egypt, okay? So we went underneath and we meditated underneath the pyramid. But what we did, and this was optional, but of course everyone did it, is we did a technique that would measure our energetic field, and it would show where our chakras were. There was a graphic. It would show the size of them and the placement and blah, 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 your energy. I still have that report somewhere. So we would have that done before we went under the pyramid. And then we went under, we did a tour, and we meditated for whatever, 20, 30 minutes. I don't know how long. Then we came out and we had it done again. And every single person had their aura improved, their chakras were more centered, larger, blah, 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 blah. It was actually quite impressive to see. And in fact, with I don't know what you know about pyramid energy, but the longer you meditate in a pyramid, it creates a torsion field. And the energy is healing to, of course, our bodies. And people have gone to the pyramid to meditate there when they've had deadly diseases and they've healed themselves.
Wow.
And there's video out there. I had some of it on my expo website, which is now down, but it's very impressive. And so, at the Bosnian pyramid, you can go underneath, you can go on top, and you can go on the middle and even lie on the outside.
That's fantastic.
It's awesome. Now, if you go to Egypt to the pyramids, they don't even want you to close your eyes. Do not meditate. Do not do anything. Keep it moving, right?
I've been to Egypt twice, and it is I called it transformational energy, but you did describe the visits to the pyramids. Unless you go like on practically a private tour, it definitely is not as lovely as what you experienced.
You definitely have to bribe the guards and have that done in advance. And it is quite like it's overwhelming because of the hieroglyphics and stuff on the walls, but like in the Bosnian pyramid, it was much different. It was much calmer. They want you to come. They want you to meditate there. and experience that healing energy. And it's very, to me, it was extremely noticeable. So a couple people in our group took video underneath in the tunnels, and you could see orbs like so thick, so many
Wow.
orbs, you could just grab handfuls of them. Quite a great experience, you know.
I remember when you did that. That is
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. And I of course I've tried to go back twice, but it hasn't worked yet. So I hope to go back soon and maybe
Awesome.
pick a group with me. But we're a little bit off course, of course. This is really about your life.
It's about our life because
Yeah.
we're all connected.
Yes.
We're all connected and we're all one.
Right. Right. So you had your experience on horseback. You met your shaman, you started taking classes, you took Reiki, you kind of convinced yourself that your experience was real, that energy was real. And during this time, you're still having communication with David and you know, those on the other side, if you will. Anything else you'd like to tell about that life story? Like, I know we're not done with the life story yet. There's a lot that's happened, but you've been speaking all over at the IONS conferences and these other conferences about Reiki energy and life after death. And I think that's very exciting because not only does it bring knowledge to people, but it brings comfort because, you know, we're all afraid of what's going to happen when it's our time. But when we've had family members that have passed on, we want to make sure that they're safe and that they're happy.
Sure.
So having those communications and that knowledge really brings comfort to people, I think.
It does. And it's a wonderful feeling to have a continuing relationship with your loved ones that have
Right.
transitioned.
Right.
I have an interesting story about going the first time that I went to the International Association of Near-Death Studies. Now my book was published, Changemaker, How My Brother's Death Woke Up My Life, was published by She Writes Press in 2016. It was in early 2018. And I had never been to an IONS conference. IONS is the International Association of Near-Death Studies.
Right.
I had never been there, but I knew I should go there. And so I went to bed one night, and the reason I hadn't been was because it had traditionally always been during our family vacation, the same family vacation where David and I were walking on the beach. So I went to bed one night and I said, okay, I'm going to miss the major part of my family vacation and go to IONS. The very next morning, I woke up, checked my email, and the very first email was from IONS. And it said, submit a proposal to speak. And I thought, oh, okay. Not only will I go to IONS, I'll submit a proposal on after-death communication. Well, not only did the proposal get accepted, but the conference date had changed. It always now is on Labor Day. And so it doesn't interfere with my family vacation.
Yeah.
So it was out in Seattle, Washington. So I fly out to Seattle, met all these wonderful people. And the thing with near-death experiences is that a near-death experience is when our body flatlines. Essentially, our body dies, but our consciousness remains alive. And it travels most of the time to a different realm where, gosh, most of the time we see our deceased loved ones. And then the body somehow revives and we come back and we remember. We remember the incredible love and peace and joy and comfort the afterlife is. And so people that have had a near-death experience are not afraid to die anymore.
Right, right.
So I'm at IONS and I'm listening to all these wonderful presentations, and it's the last day. And they said, next year, our conference is going to be held in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, which is 20 minutes from where I live. And I'm like, holy moly. And so I became the healing coordinator for that Pennsylvania conference. And once again, then we had COVID. And so the conference was online, but they asked me to teach Reiki online in 2021. And then in 2022, we just finished the conference in Salt Lake City. And I was thrilled to again be asked to teach Reiki, which they had never had before in person. And the thing that happened this year that I wanted to share is a group by the name of the Bigelow Institute for Consciousness Studies. did a contest last year, Robert Bigelow. He said, I will give $1 million to anyone that can prove that the afterlife is real. Mid-November 2021, he awarded $1.8 million to 29 people that validated human consciousness remains after bodily death. Now, this information, 29 essays, are available for free right now. And you can get them on the internet. All you have to do is search Bigelow. It's like the T, Bigelow. Bigelow Contest Awards. That's all you have to search. Bigelow Contest Awards. And you will get 29 of these award-winning essays. And they are fantastic, absolutely fantastic. I've read a lot of them and they are excellent. And so this year at IONS, Robert Bigelow and his group presented their whole analysis of the prize-winning essays. They're involved in another program where they're still continuing this search to teach people that the afterlife is real. And to read these essays, I mean, you go to the website and there are 29 of them. They're right there. You just press a button to read them. It's fantastic. And so now we have scientific proof that the afterlife is real.
I'm going to try to look that link up and put it in our description below.
Great.
That is of interest to me. And, I shared this with you probably before we recorded that I was like told early this year, like, get it done now, to start writing down my experiences. Actually, I was told for the past 20 years to start writing them down. And you know how it is, you have a dream or something. Oh, I'll write it down tomorrow. Never do. So I've been told for 20 years to write down my experiences. Too busy to do it. So early this year, I kind of wrote an outline, and I had 200 synchronicities, coincidences, crazy, unexplained experiences, this and that. So I started putting them out in a random order on a blog, awakenstories.com. And then I was told to start doing these videos. And basically, it's just for fun, just to get this information out there. But it goes hand in hand with what you've been talking about.
Absolutely does. And way to go for having those experiences and for finally getting them out there. Like, way to go.
Yeah. And I had a different, everything than you did. You had a trauma with a major experience where throughout my life, I've had just a lot of weird things happen, fun, weird things, or inexplicable things. And like a lot of them I've kind of forgotten about. I hate to say it, but I'm writing them down now. Okay.
And it's interesting. I talk to a lot of people about their experiences, and I always encourage people to use language such, instead of weird, to use language like awesome, amazing, incredible, because weird, if thought has energy. Thought has energy. The book, The Secret by Rhonda Byrne, I think she sold about 50 million copies. She talks about the fact that our thoughts have energy. So if we say weird, it's sort of like this down, these weird things happen. But if you say, I had these amazing things happen, it's a higher level.
That's true.
And so way to go on your amazing 200 experiences.
I'm really loving doing it because it's been such, like, the past 20 years really have been quite thick with great experiences. But I had my yoga studio, which I believe you talked at the yoga studio at least once.
Yep.
But I had a very good group of people, like spiritually oriented people. We'd come in, we'd have classes, and we'd do events and this and that, and we'd always start like, you might think this is crazy, but, and I was like, I'd say, why do we say that? Why are we discrediting ourselves? We know that this is not crazy, but why do we say that to each other?
Agreed.
Sure.
Agreed.
Because we've been so programmed to say anyone that believes in horoscopes or this or that, they're too out there for us. They're crazy. They're weird. And that's not right.
And it's also not real anymore, because there has been a transition. When we had COVID it really was quite quite life-changing for everybody. Like the whole world had to reset. And in my opinion, it allowed us time to really figure out what is the best for us.
Right.
Like, what do we really want to do? And it's been interesting to see the changes that are possible, not only with ourselves, but around the whole world. And it's been a time to reset. And in my opinion, there has been quite a bit of good that has happened. I mean, it's horrible how many, just thousands and thousands of people that have passed. So I'm very sorry about that. On the other hand, for the people that are left, I believe we've chosen to come here on this earth at this time. And so thank you for being a wonderful light worker, Sue, and sharing your joys and your experiences and your awakenings.
It's been so fun, and I love doing it, just like you love doing what you're doing. And
yes,
you're doing it really to help the people, to get your experience out to them, to show them that this is real. Try Reiki. This is real. Try this. This is real. Try to meditate. You'll get so much different results if you just try something a little bit new.
Yes. And speaking of new, if I'm going to give a little commercial, if that's all right.
Yeah.
On October 8th, and so it's just about a week and a half away, on Saturday, October 8th, I have a free webinar, and it's called The 3 Secrets to Communicating with Your Deceased Loved Ones. And it's going to be from 1 to 2:30 Eastern time. So that would be like 10 to 11:30 Pacific time. And the registration just opened yesterday, as a matter of fact. And the way people can find it is going to the website After Death Secrets. So afterdeathsecrets.com. And you can register for this free webinar. And if you can't make it, you still get the recording. And so it's going to be fun. And at that, during that time, I'm going to introduce my upcoming weekend workshop called After Death Communication Weekend Workshop. And it's 2 days of a multitude of experiential activities, guided meditations, guest speakers, where people can learn how to communicate with their deceased loved ones in one weekend.
It sounds very exciting. I will also put that link into the description box.
Oh, that'd be great. Thanks.
So that people can just click, because we want to make it easy for them. Do you have a copy of your book handy?
Oh, I do. I happen to. Here it is.
What it looks like, Change Maker. And that kind of gives her life story. And I believe in the book, there's a lot of resources in the back, like websites and other places that you can go for further information. Is that correct?
There is. The way it works is at the end of every chapter is what's called an illumination. So it's set up on a month-to-month basis. Like chapter 1 is October, and that's when my brother passed. Chapter 2 is November, December, January. And every month was a phenomenal spiritual event. It was beyond belief. Some people have said that that's not real. It is real. Like it was just, it was an incredible year.
Yeah.
So I have this at the end of every chapter is what's called an illumination. Hold on. Sorry. And so the illumination is how people can replicate or learn more about what happened during that month. And each at the end of the book, and thanks for remembering it so nicely, at the end of the book is about 275 references organized by chapter. And these are all the books and resources and websites that I read that pertain to that particular information. And I did that because I fully expected to be professionally ostracized when this book came out. I thought people were going to say, Becky, you have lost your mind. But that didn't happen. And so I figured if I put 275 references, at least they'll know I'm a well-read imbecile. And so, Sue, it was so amazing. Like I hung around. It was published September 13th, 2016. And I was just like, okay, I'm waiting for these calls or emails or whatever that said you've gone over the edge. Didn't happen. But about 6 months later, my husband Jeff and I were in the whole rainforest, and we have a rainforest in the United States. It's part of Olympic National Park in Washington, the state of Washington. So we're in the whole rainforest. And I looked at my phone and it said, congratulations. Changemaker has just won 3 National Book Awards. Can you please come to the Book Expo of America in New York City and pick them up? And I'm like, all right. And so it really was quite spectacular. I picked up my illustrator, Mickey McAllister. We took the train to New York. We had our moments of fame. And Changemaker also won 2 more National Book Awards. And the thing that pleases me so much is that after death communication has hit the mainstream. So that's what brings me great pleasure.
Yes. So for anyone that's interested in the book, I've read it. It is very easy to read with a lot of personal, like I call them case studies, but stories that make it more fun and anchor in the topic that we're discussing in the chapter. I like that a lot.
Thanks.
So very
I have
easy
to say
read.
it was well edited. I can write professionally, but it's tricky to be able to write for the masses. And I had a great editor.
Excellent. Excellent. Now, do you have any tips other than the 275 references that are in your book? Do you have any tips for a person that wants to like hasten themselves along the path of awakening? Do you have anything you could recommend for them to try or do?
Yep, I do. I should say yes. Yes, I do. For one of the things we talked about is if you're looking to achieve something, ask, because there's a concept that we all have guides, but we have free will on this earth, and our guides do not interfere if it's going to interfere with our own free will. And so I encourage you to become very mindful and connected with yourself. Do it with a couple of deep breaths, breathing in love and releasing any type of stress you may have, and get yourself real connected and calm. And then whatever your goal is, specify it very objectively and clearly. I'd like to connect with my mother, or whatever you would like to say, and then let it go. Just let it go. So I encourage you to ask. I encourage you to trust yourself, to trust your heart, to trust what you're believing. If you ask to receive a communication from your loved one and a bird comes right up to you that reminds you of your grandma,
right?
Acknowledge it and think, I wonder if that's grandma. Thank you, grandma. Express gratitude and share your love. So trust your heart, believe the signs and symbols. It makes you feel better anyway. And it really does provide an opportunity for you to share love with your loved ones living in the afterlife. So ask, trust, believe, express gratitude, and know that the common denominator between life in this physical realm and life beyond is love. Love is the strongest emotion of all, and love crosses all boundaries.
Right.
And people that have had near-death experiences, which are scientifically proven experiences of coming back to this life after their body has been declared physically dead. And one of the main books is written by Dr. Eben Alexander, Proof of Heaven. I think it sold 25 million copies, New York Times bestseller, Proof of Heaven. And he's a neurophysicist, and he didn't believe in the afterlife, but he had a experience where both his brain lobes were dead. He had meningitis in both his lobes, and he had about an 8-day experience where he was in another realm, and that is described in Proof of Heaven. And it's been validated with medical records and all of that. And so near-death experiencers say that the common denominator is love. And how can we do anything better than love? Share love, believe love, know you can send love, and receive love. And so those are my big recommendations.
Those are beautiful. Do you mind if I put in a couple personal stories?
Oh, no, I love talking with you.
It's always about me, right?
No, it isn't.
My first memory was of a near-death experience, and I can tell it in about 2 minutes. I was about 2, and I was on, those old cement porches, like a couple steps up with the wrought iron railing. I was sitting on the wrought iron railing, like, like riding a horse, and I flipped over and I hit myself in the head. And next thing I know, now I'm a little kid, but I'm whoosh, I shoot up into the sky, like higher than the clouds, but I hovered there and I'm looking down at the earth. And I look down at the earth for quite a while, and then I shoot back into my body. And so that's my experience.
That's a near-death experience.
Totally. And so a lot of people have said, well, did you tell your parents and blah, 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 blah. Well, I don't actually remember. I was just a little kid, like really little, like 2-ish. And all my life, you can't really see it. My head has been, I've had this, my skull was oblong, or I had a big, a bump and a nasty scar on my forehead. Now, I have a little bit of a scar here, but if you feel my head, it's back to normal smoothness or roundness or whatever you want to call it. So the bump has gone down. The scar is still there a little bit, but it's mostly healed, which I think is super cool, right?
It is super cool.
So that's story number 1. Story number 2, last Friday, so a week ago Friday, whatever that date is, I live in a small apartment, and I had something in my hands, and I was looking down, and I'm walking really fast down my hallway, and I'm almost to the end of the hallway, and I kind of look up, and there's a cloud or a mist in front of me in the hallway. Well, I'm walking so fast, I don't have time to stop. I walked right through it, and I actually kind of went like, and I breathed some of it in, no lie. So I turned around and I look at the cloud, and, it's no longer there. I've gone through it. I knew it was a person. Okay. So, like I knew it was a person. And of course I breathed part of it in, and then I'm like kind of worried about that. But I consulted with my group because I thought it was a certain person, but they basically confirmed it was my grandfather. So it was my maternal grandfather there. And I walked through him, which I wasn't planning on doing, but I was just like hammering through the house, like getting stuff done, So I just thought that was a cool little story, because
it's great.
You never know when these experiences are going to come to you and how they're going to happen. So for me, it's just fun. It's fun.
It is fun. And you believe, to believe it and trust that it's real, and way to go to receive a message from your grandfather. And I'm quite sure that you send him lots of love and gratitude and cheers.
He's probably going to say, wait, I'm trying to tell you to slow down.
That's great, Sue. Way to go.
Too late. So I appreciate your time, and your story is an amazing story. The book is an amazing book. And what you're doing is great work out there. You're helping many.
Thanks.
Just to let people know that, there is an afterlife, and this is how you can access it. And then Reiki is such a healing and a comforting energy. And for those that maybe you don't want to practice Reiki, maybe you just want to know more about energy, it's a great way to get started. All right.
Agreed.
Now, I've heard from people that there is a Reiki courses online for like $10. I'm not saying that I'd recommend that. I think if you have the ability to go in a face-to-face in-person class, you get to practice with yourself, with other people. And that's really where you're going to feel the energy and feel that it's really real. I think that's recommended.
So on that line,
yes,
that's exactly the way I thought until COVID.
Yes.
And so I teach all over the country and universities and all that, and everything stopped. Right. So I'm like, wow, this is sort of interesting. I wonder how effective online Reiki could be. And so at that exact same time that I was trying to figure out if I could have an effective online class, I had on my website that I do online Reiki.
Right.
A woman that I'd never met before signed up for an online Reiki treatment. And she says, so you do online Reiki? And I, sort of gulped and said, yes, I do. And I said, the way I do it is that I have people place their laptop screen so that I could see the upper part of them.
Right.
Now, you don't have to do that, but we are physical beings. And to me, it does help for our minds and the other person to know that we can actually see what we're doing.
Right.
So I'm sending her, it was an hour session. About 20 minutes in, I'm beaming her energy. So I'm beaming her Reiki energy, and it felt like she had a pain in her right knee. So I write down on my yellow pad, which I always have, and it said pain in right knee. So I sent her Reiki until the pain, it seemed like the pain I needed to go some other place. She was receiving Reiki so well that I felt like she was levitating above the bed. So I write down on my yellow pad, levitating above the bed. After about 45 minutes, we finished with the hands-on Reiki with me sending it to her. And I said, how are you feeling? Now, I had never met her before. And she said, Becky, I didn't tell you when I started that I had a pain in my right knee, but it's now gone. And so I hold up my yellow pad and it said pain in right knee. And I said, well, emotionally, how are you feeling? And she said, at one point, I felt like I was dancing on air. And so I hold up my yellow pad again, which said levitating above the bed. And at that point, I'm like, okay, how can I teach Reiki online that would be effective? And so what I do is I use Zoom breakout rooms. And Zoom breakout rooms, you can set how many people you want in each room. And so I have Zoom breakout rooms with just 2 people. And so then if like you and I were doing it, say I would send you Reiki, and then we would talk about it. And it's just 2 people in the room. Then you would send me Reiki, and then we would talk about it. And so we talk about it in just a very secure environment. It's just us. And then we come back as a big group and talk about it. And we do that 3 different times with 3 different partners. And so by the end of the day, self Reiki plus can feel the energy, whether it's in person or online. And it works. And it's really been astounding. If you have an experiential component, that's the trick with the online, is to make sure that there's an experiential component. And so I teach what's called Reiki immersion online. And I do that in the spring.
That's spot on, because it is the experiential part that anchors into the person that this is real. It does.
Yes.
And it's not just about Reiki, whatever we're talking about in the spiritual genre. It is real. If you try it, you will feel the energy. You will know this. You will have a vision. You will have this, whatever it might be. So to me, that's really important.
I'm going to do that exact same thing with this After Death Communication Weekend Workshop, which is November 5th and 6th, 2022. And we're going to have partnering sessions with just 2 people in each room after we do a guided meditation. And there's 8 different sessions, 2 guest speakers, including a physician that sees and talks with spirits. And he's an emergency room physician, Dr. Jeff O'Driscoll. And I am so excited that he's one of my guest speakers.
Excellent.
And so we're going to have these guided meditations and then go into the Zoom breakout rooms with just 2 people per room and share the experiences.
Excellent.
And so that way people will be able to experience it, and each session it builds on the other one. And so it should be fun. It's going
to be amazing. And you're doing, like I said, you're doing such great work for the world. And it's so exciting to see more and more people awakening, more and more people accepting this as real. And you don't have to over-explain anymore. And of course, then there's information, there's books. The internet and YouTube have been instrumental in getting the word out about these experiences. People are capturing things on their cameras that you couldn't get 20 years ago, even.
Agreed.
Now that we've got our phones with us all the time, we're able to click. Of course, that's, I'm old school. I'll look at something and I'll have an experience and I'm like, oh, I should have taken a picture. But it is what it is.
and if you take a picture, great. And if you don't, that's fine too.
Yeah. And especially I see some crazy things all the time. It's very exciting.
And you're doing a great job getting it out, Sue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anything else you want to add in before we close?
I would like everybody who's on to know that you are totally awesome, and to please give yourself a nice big hug of love and support and cheer from myself and from Sue to you, because you're the most important person.
Right.
If you can help yourself heal, everything else is fantastic. Synchronicities abound. Ever since I sold my business, I had a big, huge rehabilitation practice, which I sold right before I became public with this information. And honest to Pete, my life has been magical. So allow yourself to feel the joys of following your heart and sharing love. It's great, great
Right.
life.
And one thing I know about you is that you're always positive. You never speak a negative word. You're grateful, you're happy, you're loving. And those are the highest possible vibrations we can have. So that's when you invite in all of these other loving experiences.
That's
So
great. Thank you.
yeah, thank you. Well, thank you so much for your time. I will put some of the links in the bottom, and I can't wait to see you again, hopefully in person soon.
Oh, I can't wait. And thank you so much for having me. And
Thank
I'll send
you.
you some links too,
Okay,
so you'll be able to get
perfect.
them
Thank you
momentarily.
so much.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great day. Lots of love, always and forever.
Thank you. You too.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.